You think generosity makes people love you. But what if the very act of giving is the reason you are being used, disrespected, and quietly drained? What if every gift you offer today becomes tomorrow's expectation and next week's resentment? Today, we're exposing the truth no one dares admit. Your generosity is the trap destroying your power, your respect, and your influence, one favor at a time. Let's uncover why those who give too much end up controlled, manipulated, and eventually discarded, and how to break free before it's too late. Generosity is often celebrated as a virtue, but when examined through the lens of power, it reveals its true nature as a subtle poison. When a ruler, a leader, or even an ordinary individual gives too freely, the recipients begin to reorganize their expectations, their loyalties, and their ambitions around that source of abundance. What begins as goodwill transforms into a dependency that weakens both sides. The giver becomes trapped in a cycle of constant offering, and the receivers lose the willingness or incentive to act independently. Human beings naturally gravitate toward the easiest path, and nothing is easier than receiving benefits without labor or sacrifice. Once they learn that you are willing to provide, they will modify their behavior not to grow, not to build, not to contribute, but to remain in a position where they can continue collecting what they did not earn. Dependency is a powerful thing, but not when it works against the one who inspires it. A dependent servant is useful. A dependent population is dangerous. They will not admire the giver, they will demand from him. They will see his generosity not as a gift, but as a duty. They will grow accustomed to it, then entitled to it, and eventually resentful when it is not offered in the quantity or frequency they expect. The giver, if he attempts to withdraw or adjust his giving, will find himself perceived as cruel or selfish, even if the recipients never deserved anything in the first place. Generosity becomes the rope by which the giver binds his own hands. Furthermore, those who rely on you become soft. Their hunger dulls, their initiative dissolves, their capacity to think for themselves erodes. What you create is not grateful allies, but weakened dependents who neither respect you nor value themselves. Once you weaken the ambitions of men by feeding them what they did not fight for, you strip them of the qualities that make them useful. You end up surrounded by people who cling to your shadow instead of standing on their own legs. They will not act when danger arrives. They will not defend you when enemies rise. They will expect you to solve everything for them because you trained them to believe you would. And yet, the greatest danger is that generosity distorts perception. The giver begins to believe that he is admired, appreciated, and loved. But men praise generosity only while they benefit from it. The day they receive nothing, they change their tone. People are loyal to advantage, not benevolence. That is the fundamental truth buried beneath the illusion of generosity. It inspires temporary affection but permanent expectation. And once expectations rise, disappointment becomes inevitable. In this way, generosity plants the seeds of its own destruction. Many rulers have fallen because they believed that giving freely would secure their position. But gifts do not build the foundation of power, discipline does. The more one gives, the more one must continue giving. The people who feast on generosity become vocal when deprived, and their complaints spread faster than their gratitude ever did. Gratitude is quiet, but resentment is loud. Dependency is never a neutral force. It either strengthens your control with intention or weakens it through miscalculated kindness. Generosity breeds dependency because it shifts the balance of effort from the recipient to the giver. It convinces men to wait rather than work, to hope rather than act, and to beg rather than lead. It is better to give men the tools to rise than to give them the comfort that keeps them still. True strength emerges from struggle, not softness. A leader who creates dependency secretly manufactures his own downfall, for the dependents stand behind you when they need something. But they will not stand with you when you need them. And once they realize that they rely on you more than you rely on them, they cease to respect you, because no man respects the hand that feeds him as long as he believes he is entitled to the feast. Generosity, when uncontrolled, is the leash that the giver wraps around his own neck. It is the softest, quietest way for a leader to lose discipline over his followers. It replaces mutual strength with one-sided obligation. It trades respect for temporary praise. Dependency is not a sign of loyalty. It is the sign that generosity has grown too large, too frequent, and too central to the relationship between the giver and those who follow him. What begins as kindness becomes expectation, and what begins as gratitude becomes entitlement. And so, the powerful must understand that generosity is never a simple act of giving, but a transformation of the entire dynamic between themselves and those who receive, shaping dependencies that inevitably turn into burdens, demands, and quiet resentments that gnaw away at the strength of the giver, until he becomes a servant to the people he once believed he was leading to. Give freely is to expose oneself. Every gift reveals weakness, whether it is a weakness of desire, a weakness of image, or a weakness of fear. People observe generosity not as a sign of nobility, but as a signal, an invitation, that the giver can be persuaded through flattery, emotion, pity, or persistence. Generosity draws manipulators the way blood draws wolves. The more lavish the giving, the more vicious the wolves become, for they sense that the giver is attempting to secure affection or approval, and the moment others detect that someone longs to be liked, appreciated, or seen as benevolent, they begin to weaponize that desire against him. Manipulators always approach the generous first, because they know the generous feel the urge to maintain a particular image. Once a giver establishes himself as a person who cannot refuse a request, others, both clever and foolish, build strategies around that weakness. They become masters of the subtle art of emotional influence. They will tell stories designed to provoke sympathy, generate guilt, or stir fear. They will exaggerate their needs, fabricate their hardships, and highlight their helplessness. They will pretend loyalty, admiration, and respect, but their true devotion is to the giver's generosity, not to the giver himself. It is not the amount of money or resources given that attracts manipulation. It is the psychological posture behind the giving. Those who give to secure love are the easiest to exploit. Those who give to hide insecurity attract opportunists who sense the fear beneath the act. And those who give to prove themselves good become victims of people who know exactly how to provoke that sense of moral obligation. Manipulators understand that generosity has very little to do with kindness and everything to do with vulnerability. The moment generosity becomes predictable, manipulation becomes effortless. People learn that the simplest request, wrapped in just enough urgency, will be granted. They learn that the giver would rather sacrifice his own comfort, stability, or resources than endure the discomfort of saying no. And once they learn this, they no longer view him as powerful, discerning, or wise. They view him as emotionally fragile, someone whose decisions can be tugged by the threads of sentiment rather than anchored by logic. The generous often believe that giving earns respect, but the truth is that it erodes it. People respect firmness, boundaries, and measured control. They do not respect someone who bleeds resources in the name of goodwill. The overly generous become tools, usable, predictable, reliable. Manipulators treat them not as leaders but as assets to be harvested. Each request becomes a test, and each compliance becomes proof of weakness. And as the giver becomes more entangled in his reputation for generosity, people begin to strategize around his predictability. They time their requests carefully. They craft their words with precision. They magnify their crises to ensure they get what they want. The manipulation does not always appear malicious. Some people manipulate unconsciously, simply responding to the incentives created by the giver. If people know they will receive if they ask, they will ask more often. If they know the giver seeks approval, they will offer insincere praise. If they sense guilt, they will exploit it by portraying themselves as victims. In either case, whether intentional or instinctual, the generous person becomes a puppet pulled by strings of gratitude, fear, and responsibility. The most dangerous form of manipulation is the one that appears loyal. When people discover that generosity can be maintained through emotional attachment, they begin to act devoted, supportive, even affectionate. But their loyalty is an investment, not a sentiment. They invest in the giver's emotional need to be appreciated, knowing that by feeding that need, they guarantee future benefits. Such loyalty dissolves immediately when generosity stops. The mask falls the moment the giver attempts to set boundaries, and the true nature of their attachment is revealed. It was the gifts they needed, not the giver. When generosity is frequent, manipulation becomes the currency with which people buy influence over the giver. And as more manipulators gather, the giver's world becomes filled not with allies but with actors, each performing for the sake of their own advantage. The generous person becomes the center of a carefully constructed illusion, believing he is loved while being used, believing he is respected while being handled, believing he is trusted while being controlled. Manipulators thrive around those who cannot resist giving, because they recognize that generosity is the easiest door through which to enter a person's mind and reshape his decisions. Wealth, when seen through the structure of power, is not merely a tool of comfort but a weapon of influence. Those who treat money as something to display or scatter earn nothing but temporary admiration and permanent weakness. Every coin spent should serve a purpose. Every resource allocated should strengthen one's position. Wealth is not a symbol of generosity, but an instrument of strategy. To spend without purpose is to arm your rivals and disarm yourself at the same time. Those who do not understand this simple truth often find themselves admired while they possess wealth, and forgotten the moment they lose it. For admiration built on generosity is admiration built on sand. Money is strength because it represents capability. It represents mobility, negotiation, potential, and control. A wealthy man can act. A poor man can only react. A wealthy leader can build alliances. A desperate one must beg for them. And above all, wealth gives the ability to choose. Choice is the essence of power. Therefore, spending money without strategy is equivalent to surrendering choices without necessity. It is ceasing to be the author of events and beginning to be a participant in events controlled by others. One must understand that when a leader distributes wealth randomly or excessively, he teaches his followers to focus not on earning but on receiving. People stop working toward a mission and begin working toward the next handout. They stop striving for excellence and start striving for access to the leader's generosity. Talent shifts from productivity to proximity. The strongest men no longer rise, the most persuasive beggars do. The environment becomes distorted. The wrong people gain influence. The right people lose motivation. The entire system weakens because the center has taught everyone to seek reward without merit. Strategic spending, by contrast, creates power and direction. When money is used to reward strength, loyalty, and discipline, those qualities grow. When money is used to support essential structures, security, intelligence, alliances, it becomes a foundation. Strategic wealth multiplies itself, not through interest or investments, but through the loyalty, fear, and stability it generates. But strategic wealth requires discipline. It requires the willingness to say no even when yes seems easier. It requires resisting the desire to appear compassionate in the moment in order to remain powerful in the long run. There is also a fundamental truth that many fail to acknowledge: people value what costs them effort. A gift freely given is rarely respected. A reward earned is cherished. When money is spent strategically, it forces the recipient to contribute something of value, be it loyalty, work, allegiance, or risk. And in exchange, the bond formed is stronger. Free gifts create soft alliances, strategic investments create durable ones. The difference between the two is the difference between admiration and dependence, between strength and fragility. Spending wealth without strategy also attracts predators. Opportunists, sycophants, and flatterers flock to those who give carelessly. They circle the giver, learning his weaknesses, waiting for the right moment to exploit them. They observe where he spends and why. The more they learn, the easier it becomes to manipulate him, for money without strategy signals emotional vulnerability. Those who do not guard their wealth carefully cannot guard their power at all. Meanwhile, those who spend strategically often appear less generous, but they are far safer. They maintain control over their resources, their alliances, and their future. They create systems where each coin spent strengthens their position rather than weakens it. They are respected not because they give, but because they govern their giving with precision. Wealth is respected when it is reserved. It is diminished when it is scattered. To understand the true nature of wealth is to realize that every expenditure carries a message. When you give freely, you signal that your resources are limitless, even when they are not. When you give strategically, you signal that your resources are valuable and that access to them requires merit. This distinction determines whether people approach you with dignity or with greed. Wealth is power only when it is used deliberately. Without strategy, wealth becomes a leash that others pull. With strategy, wealth becomes the chain you hold, the boundary you set, and the force that compels others to align with your interests. Money is not the enemy. The undisciplined use of money is, and those who understand this truth hold an advantage that cannot be taken from them. Only surrendered fairness is the bedrock upon which respect is built. Generosity, by contrast, is a fleeting spectacle, admired only in the moment and forgotten as soon as it ceases. When a leader strives to appear generous, he enters a dangerous competition he can never win. People will always want more than he can give. They will measure him not by what he offers, but by what he withholds. Generosity places a leader on the edge of a cliff, where every refusal becomes a betrayal and every reduction becomes an offense. Fairness avoids this trap entirely. When a leader is known as fair, expectations are grounded in reason, not greed. Generosity encourages people to expect benefits without effort. Fairness encourages them to understand the terms of reward. When a leader is fair, people know that outcomes are tied to merit, discipline, and contribution. They cannot manipulate fairness. They cannot flatter it nor guilt it into compliance. Fairness is a shield that blocks emotional influence, while generosity is a door left open to those who know how to appeal to sentiment. The pursuit of being seen as generous is inherently unstable. It creates an image that must be maintained at great cost. A generous leader must constantly provide, constantly satisfy, constantly expand his giving to keep pace with the expectations he himself has created. And once generosity becomes a defining trait, any moment of restraint is interpreted as decline, weakness, or indifference. People do not see the reason behind the limits. They only see that their portion is smaller and their grievances louder. Generosity is a spectacle that quickly becomes a burden, for the crowd never stays satisfied. Fairness, on the other hand, earns a different type of loyalty. It does not inspire excitement but stability. It does not produce adoration but trust. People may not praise fairness loudly, but they will defend it fiercely, because fairness gives them a sense of order and predictability. When people understand the rules that govern their rewards and consequences, they adjust their behavior willingly. They work harder, not to win favor but to earn what they believe is rightfully theirs under a fair system. A generous leader must constantly negotiate with the emotions of others. A fair leader negotiates only with principles. This distinction protects him from endless petitioners who seek private advantage. Under a fair system, those who beg or manipulate are denied not because the leader is cold, but because the rules do not allow exceptions. This removes the leader from personal conflict. He is not the villain who refused a gift. He is the guardian of a system that treats all equally. People respect those who are difficult to sway. They may admire the generous, but they trust the fair. Trust is a far rarer and more valuable currency. When a crisis arises, admiration disappears, but trust remains. Those who benefited from generosity flee when the flow weakens. Those who rely on fairness remain, because their loyalty is built on principles, not gifts. Furthermore, fairness preserves dignity on both sides. Recipients of fairness remain strong because they earn what they receive. Recipients of generosity often become ashamed, even if they do not admit it. They know internally that they accepted what they did not deserve. This breeds subconscious resentment. They blame the giver for reminding them of their dependence, even as they continue to take. Fairness avoids this dynamic altogether. It creates a relationship where everyone maintains pride, because everything is balanced by merit. Fairness also protects the leader from parasites. Generous leaders attract manipulators who seek to extract benefits. Fair leaders attract disciplined individuals who respect order. The caliber of people surrounding a leader determines the strength of his rule. A fair system attracts those who seek to build. A generous system attracts those who seek to take. Finally, fairness is sustainable. Generosity drains resources and energy. It creates cycles of expectation that escalate over time. Fairness, grounded in structure and principle, requires no expansion to maintain. It is stable, predictable, and enduring. It creates a legacy not of gifts scattered, but of systems maintained, of loyalty earned, and of authority preserved. Value increases when access decreases. This is a law that governs everything: wealth, relationships, skills, and influence. When a leader gives too freely, he becomes ordinary. When he gives rarely and selectively, he becomes sought after. Controlled scarcity is not cruelty, it is strategy. It ensures that what you offer remains desirable, respected, and powerful. Abundance cheapens everything. Scarcity elevates it. People are wired to desire what is limited. They pursue what they cannot easily obtain. They respect what they must work for. When a leader practices controlled scarcity, his attention, his approval, his resources, and his support become rare commodities. People adjust their behavior accordingly. They strive harder, they discipline themselves. They value every small gift because it is not guaranteed. Scarcity creates significance. Generosity creates routine. Scarcity creates impact. When every favor is expected, it loses meaning. When every favor is earned, it transforms into a symbol of recognition. A leader who rarely gives builds stronger loyalty than a leader who gives constantly, because each act carries weight. People remember what is scarce. They forget what is abundant. Controlled scarcity also protects the leader from exploitation. When people know that benefits are limited, they do not waste them. They do not dare manipulate or demand. They calculate their requests carefully. They approach the leader with respect, not greed. And in this process, scarcity forces others to reveal their true intentions. Those who remain loyal without receiving much are genuine. Those who leave were never allies to begin with. Scarcity is the fire that burns away false loyalty. Furthermore, scarcity teaches people to stand on their own. When a leader gives seldom, he forces others to develop strength, resourcefulness, and independence. This creates a stronger, more capable circle of followers. They learn to solve problems, not beg for solutions. They learn to adapt, not rely. A leader who provides everything weakens his people. A leader who provides sparingly strengthens them, because he teaches them to rely on themselves first. Controlled scarcity also amplifies authority. People instinctively respect what is not easily accessible. They respect the leader who does not appear desperate for their affection. They respect the leader who maintains distance and restraint. The more selective a person is with his resources, the more others assume he must possess something extraordinarily valuable. Scarcity builds mystique, and mystique builds power. In social dynamics, those who give attention freely are ignored, while those who offer it sparingly are pursued. In leadership, those who grant favors constantly are used, while those who grant them wisely are honored. In wealth, those who spend recklessly are forgotten, while those who spend strategically are feared. Scarcity enhances significance in every domain. Scarcity also prevents the erosion of standards. When benefits are rare, people appreciate them. When benefits are common, people take them for granted. A leader who gives too often will find that even his greatest gifts spark only mild gratitude. But a leader who rarely gives finds that even his smallest gestures inspire deep loyalty. Human psychology does not reward abundance, it glorifies rarity. Controlled scarcity is also a defense against chaos. When a leader distributes resources sparingly, he maintains control. He can direct behavior, shape priorities, and guide ambition. Scarcity forces people to compete, to organize, to align themselves with the leader's goals. It creates order out of desire. Abundance dissolves hierarchy. Scarcity reinforces it. Ultimately, controlled scarcity transforms the leader into the source that others revolve around. He becomes the one whose approval is earned, whose judgment is awaited, whose favor is treasured. People do not chase the generous, they chase the scarce, because scarcity awakens ambition, discipline, and desire in ways generosity never can. And when the time comes to give, the impact is profound, because scarcity has made the giver's hand not only valuable but unforgettable.